just want to mention, since we're in Oxford, we've had Tolkien. C.S. Lewis had Pallas in Libra. This is the air sign thing that I was talking about. And Lewis Carroll had Pallas in Aquarius in a giant stellium, obviously, and he was a mathematician. And I haven't done mathematician's Pallas, but I'm sure that you would find that Pallas Athena is very involved with that. I have done a little bit on chess players, and they also have very strong Pallas. So you can see how this systems things works. And the reason I think that Lewis Carroll is quite an interesting example is because the whole of Alice in Wonderland is like a giant sort of puzzle. It's like a Rubik's Cube that can be taken apart and put back together, and there are lots of different facets and different games in it. I think that it's not in his fifth house. It's down at the bottom. But anyway, it's part of a giant Aquarian stellium. Okay, let's crack on with some more visions. Because the vision can also start to become, it's not always this very mathematical one like Lewis Carroll or even J.K. Rowling. That's this very organized one. It can become also visionary. Yeah, and the reason I was thinking about this, and I looked up, I thought, who are the most visionary poets that we have in the English language who are always called visionary? Well, there's William Butler Yeats, obviously, who wrote a book called A Vision, and there's William Blake, obviously, as well. Well, guess what? They both have Pallas Athena making a conjunction to Venus. So they're, and it's interesting. This is a picture of Maud Gonne, who, of course, everybody probably knows that Yeats was obsessed with her for years. This Irish revolutionary nationalist. Again, nationalism, or at least patriotism, comes up again. And he actually describes her in a poem called Beautiful Lofty Things that he wrote quite late in life. He's thinking about people he's known in the poem. He says, Maud Gonne at Howth Station, waiting a train, Pallas Athena in that straight back and arrogant head. Isn't she just? She's wearing the helmet. She is an avatar of Pallas Athena, for him anyway, and for us. And I've put Blake's a little picture by Blake up there as well. And I haven't put his chart up, but I have a quote from him which I think is really interesting for this vision thing. And he says, I must create a system or be enslaved by another man's. And this becomes important when we start to think of Pallas politically, yeah, with our friend Abraham Lincoln, for example. But visionary, people who have a vision, an inner vision, and I think that Yeats was extraordinarily visionary poet. But having the Pallas-Venus conjunction also gives him the ability to give beauty structure. Yeah, so his poems are beautiful, but they're very highly structured. They're not some kind of stream of consciousness thing. They're very structured, and that's structuring beauty. And Blake does the same thing, is structured art, that they're going to do this whole system, or at least they're going to follow very, what's the word? Not rigid exactly, but strong structures. Right, so then I was thinking, right, we understand that this is about vision and about structure. And I thought about these guys, okay? And I looked up astrologers, loads of them. So who would like to guess where Lynn's Pallas is? And I'll just give you a hint. We have a traveling person with a huge mind who uses many different cultural references, and she's a teacher. It's in the ninth. It's in the ninth, and it's in Aquarius, of course. And actually, you'll find that Pallas in Aquarius is really common for astrologers. Yeah, not all of them. It doesn't have to be blah blah blah. But actually, it comes up again and again. Faye, I know where your Pallas is too.
I do too now.
But Faye said to me, she said to me last night, no, the night before I looked up where her Pallas was, she said, I'm a very practical astrologer. I come up with, practical solutions to things. So who would like, any guesses on the sign?
Capricorn.
Yeah. Capricorn. Work. Faye is a vocational astrologer. It's her big thing. It's what, as well as Sirius. But one of your USPs is that you're a vocational astrologer. You have Pallas in Capricorn. She works one-to-one with people. It's on the ascendant. Sorry, on the descendant. It's right on it. So if you got Faye one-to-one, she would sort you out. But it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, strategy. It's exactly. So that's what I mean, that what Faye does, and not that I'm going to try and sort of sell your services too much, but I will. What Faye does is that you walk away with a plan, right, after you've seen her one-to-one, right? That's pretty much it. And that's Pallas in Capricorn. So these are all people who, this is just a whole bunch of Pallases. Charles Carter, conjunct the Sun in Aquarius. Carter was really a hugely important person in 20th century astrology. Burton, Pallas conjunct the Sun in Aquarius. Again, Alan Leo, Pallas in the ninth, which I think is quite a common one. So what I was looking for with this was, of course, typical astrologers stuff like Uranus, Saturn, Aquarius, that kind of thing, and the Sun, because of the vocational whatever. So you see that it actually works out really well. Liz Green has Pallas conjunct the Moon, the first, trine Mercury in the ninth in publishing. So Herman's is it in Virgo? I can't remember. Liz Sag. So that's someone with a huge basket of cultural knowledge that she brings to astrology. Linda Goodman, I thought that was hilarious. That Linda Goodman, who wrote Love Signs, and a phenomenally successful astrologer and a publishing phenomenon. That book is still in print. It's been in print since 1970. It's on like the 170 millionth edition, and it's made everybody zillions. So of course she has Pallas conjunct Venus, which is the romantic side of her thing, and it's in the ninth house of publishing. Rick Levine, who you guys have probably seen, or I hope that you occasionally see his monthly forecasts. They're very good on Pallas conjunct Uranus in the first, of course. Horary, Pallas conjunct North Node and Jupiter in the 10th. So these were aspects that I did mainly. Donna Cunningham, sadly missed, Pallas in Aquarius, trine Mercury in Gemini. And of course, she was, again, someone who published a lot and wrote a lot. She had still her website, still very useful. So I extracted the chart information from Astro Data Bank, founded by Lois Rawdon. So you guys know that she was the greatest collector of astrological data, in other words, birth times, and she came up with a system of how to rate birth times. So she would give things, that's why you get a AA rating. It's because of Lois Rawdon saying this is either a really good and accurate birth time, or you get a D rating, which is the one I just gave you for J.K. Rowling. Is probably around a C of hearsay. But the idea of rating birth times is actually really useful for astrologers. And she came up with it. So, of course, she's got Pallas rising, so in Aquarius. So she's coming up with this system that she can give to the rest of us, which is a really amazing. Oh, who did I put up? I put up Alan Leo.
And just interestingly enough, Eloise, who does Astro.com and who put Astro Data Bank online, is an Aquarius.
Yeah.
So there's probably a Pallas connection
Yeah.
between them.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
You can. I mean, these are only the ones I could be bothered to type out. Basically, it's hard. You can't really find an astrologer who's not got something going on with Pallas. Whether that's just Pallas in an air sign or something, you'll find it. So that's actually quite why I put Alan Leo up. I'm now remembering, because he was known as the father of 20th century astrology. So what would you expect to see? Well, he's got Pallas in the 9th. This is quite a common placement for astrologers, for obvious reasons, because it's about philosophy and knowledge. It's the house of teaching. But it's making this very nice trine to his Saturn rising. So he's the daddy. When you have Saturn rising, you're the parent of something. You can be seen as the parent of something, or the daddy, the father of modern astrology. So there you get the trine. That says it. In fact, I think it says it almost more than anything else in the chart. Just that one, that this chart sums up that one phrase is there, father of astrology. And that is, so why do I bring up astrology and astrologers? It's because we know we have a system of knowledge, yeah? And that you have to have wide sight and insight in order to be an astrologer, to do astrology. You need to have the inner vision, which I think that Pallas Athena gives us, and you need to be able to read the stars. So it's quite a weird thing to do, and it's not unlike, that's probably why mathematicians have this as well. One of the reasons that I was thinking about vision was because of a conversation that I had with Sally. Can I mention this person? I won't mention her name or anything.
Yeah, sure.
And we were talking about this talk that I was going to do, and she said, well, I had a really interesting person the other day. She had all of her planets were on one side of her chart, except for Pallas. And she was born blind, or with very impaired vision. And that's what started me off thinking about this idea of vision. So her inner vision must be very strong, this woman. The idea of the gaze and this gray-eyed Athena, when you hear that phrase gray-eyed, it makes you think of the sea or something, doesn't it? Sorry?
I was just thinking about cataracts.
Yeah.
It's a grey thing.
It's a grey thing, exactly. It's also when someone's blind, they're looking inward sometimes with those grey eyes. And the other part of it, in her story, it's really important that it's Cassandra who triggers off her whole fury with the Greeks. Cassandra was the Trojan who Apollo fell in love with, and he gave her the ability to predict the future. But then he got cross with her, so he gave her the ability to predict the future, and no one would believe her. Yeah, so again, that's about vision. She's got this vision, and she is one of Athena's people. Yeah. And we'll come to that as well, because I think there's someone who's a bit like a Cassandra. How are we doing? Yeah. I told you so! Crash bang. Okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about visionaries, okay? Because as I got up a couple of more charts, presumably most of you have heard of Joseph Campbell, who was the great American mythographer who synthesized many myths from all over the world, and who's been incredibly influential when it comes to many things, but including very influential in narrative and filmmaking. People use his ideas all the time. So he has Pallas in Sagittarius. So what he's doing again that thing of going around the world. He went around the world and gathered all this stuff and turned it into a giant system. So he wrote that book of The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The idea, and he charts the idea of the hero's journey, which we hear so much about in the New Age, but which really stems from a lot of his thinking and a lot of his very, very wide reading. So he's got the Pallas there, and it's making, again, a nice trine to the sun, and he's got this grand trine, this fiery grand trine, which wouldn't exist if you took the Pallas out. You know, that you wouldn't have that idea, you wouldn't have the Sagittarian side so much. You'd have it with those guys, but you wouldn't have that Sagittarian side singing with the sun. So his identity and everything, his heart, was in this work. And he I don't know how many books he wrote, but a gazillion, and how many people he influenced. So any, you know, actually it's been a slightly kind of repetitive influence, but so many Hollywood movies in the last 20 years have got this hero's journey where you have the obstacle and it's like that. And this is to do with having read Joseph Campbell, who was he at Berkeley? I think he was in
No, he was at Sarah Lawrence.
Sarah Lawrence. So he's incredibly influential, and he's got this grand trine in fire. So he was also inspirational. So he inspired, which is what fire does for us, he inspired generations of people to think about myth and the myth in a different, in a global way. He talks about Greek myths a lot, and etc. He uses a lot of Native American stuff, which is interesting. Okay, now Richard Alpert is actually Ram Dass. Be Here Now. Speaking of people who've been wildly influential and having a vision and having a system, he really brought Eastern thinking to the West in the 60s. He wrote a book called Be Here Now, which is about mindfulness. It's what we call mindfulness now. We mean meditating. You know, that's what this guy's doing. And it's in Virgo. So I think it's about bring the sacred into the everyday experience. Yeah. And he had a system for it. It's interesting that book was a slightly communal effort. A lot of people participated in that and making that book. Okay, so I think that if you're interested in this, it's worth looking at the conjunctions of Pallas with Neptune, because we've had quite a few of those now. And that's the conjunction of the system with the imagination. You know, when those two things are working together, you get this incredible, either, in his case, actually very personal and focused way of doing stuff, but very influential, or this very wide-ranging thing.